1990 when a certain realtor in Manassas just got in the business. I was in the doctor's office having an appointment, and they called me and they said, "Mr. Heltzel, you have a call." And I have a call. What are you talking about? So I pick up the phone. Of course, it's on the wall. Pick up the phone, push the button, and it's Forrest. He says, "Hey, man, I know you're at the doctor, but I got a question. I called your office, and your assistant Kim said it was okay to call." I said, "Okay, it's fine. What's the question?" He answered the question.
Good morning, Forrest. How are you?
Good morning, Lonnie.
Hey, here we are back in Manassas together.
Yes.
Gosh, that doing the whole podcast thing separated by 400 miles, and me having a different camera and a different mic was a little.
I don't like to be away from you, brother. I want to be close.
I know.
Rob got between us today.
I know. So here we are, episode 4. Can you believe it?
Oh, of course I can. And Rob was our special guest when we had Real Estate Talk.
He was,
Way
yeah,
back in the
20
day.
years ago. Well,
At least.
definitely aging us here, right? Well, this morning we have our first special guest. I'm going to let Forrest formally introduce him, and we're very excited to have you here, Rob.
Thanks, Lonnie.
Yeah, Rob Heltzel's been in the mortgage business ever since. I mean, he gets out of high school, goes to college, gets out of college, and starts working for his dad as mortgage business over on Forest Wood Lane, and he's done it ever since. You know, it's just been a huge part of not just the mortgage business, but also the business of community, family, community. If it's important to the community, Rob's going to be there, and that's what I love. Amongst so many things about Rob Heltzel is that's the kind of guy he is. He's there always. It's the heart and the soul. And he's just the best mortgage person. If he ever qualified for 20 years, he was my go-to, and the only guy I used. And if he said that you could get the loan, well, then you're going to settlement, and you're going to settlement on time. So he does a great job.
Appreciate it, Forrest. I appreciate you both. Good to see you. Yeah, I think it's longer than 20 years since we did this, Lonnie, but we'll date ourselves. But
Yeah. So
20
it was-
plus. We'll just
It
say
was
20 plus.
now we've been in leadership, so it was what year did we do
Right.
our first one? 1999.
1999. Yeah, so 25 years.
I'm going to need a calculator. You know, I'm the math guy. But no, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. I mean, I appreciate the chance to be with you. Also appreciate the kind words for us. We go back. We were boys together. And appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this vision, this project that you guys have. I think it's a great thing and greatly appreciate it. So,
Well, tell us a little bit about where you are now, Rob, and you're with Fairway. Tell us a little bit about them.
okay, so I had followed my father in the mortgage business, ran Heltzel Mortgage for about 35 years. I had a couple partnerships with financial institutions, and then I surrendered the license. The company still exists. It'll be 60 years old next February.
Jeez.
And but I spent a couple years with George Mason Mortgage. I've been with Fairway Mortgage now for 5 years. Enjoy the company, great company. You know, I can tell you plenty about it. I mean, Fairway is about the 7th largest lender in the country, independent lender owned by the employees. Licensed all 50 states. Right now, there's about 5,200 or so employees. Top 10 in just about every category, VA loans, FHA loans. Great company. And to Forrest's comment about community, the CEO, Steve Jacobson, says, you know, basically mortgages is what we do. It's not who we are. So they're very active in nonprofits around the country, including their own called Fairway Cares, which provides care packages to folks who are in need, lost a family member, you know, sickness, whatever. And they partner with the American Warrior Initiative, and our primary focus is we give away service dogs. So we give away about 100 service dogs a year to veterans. So VA loans and veterans are very high on the list. So I enjoy my time there. Been 5 years. So
Well, that's awesome. Well, so when Forrest and I, decided to come together and do the Next Home, the agency group thing, what was important to us is that we surrounded ourselves with the right people, right? It wasn't necessarily about the company. It was about the people. And we knew right away that, we wanted Rob Heltzel in Virginia, for sure.
I appreciate it.
Because we know that, when you say you're going to do something, you actually deliver. And being a consumer-centric organization, that's really important for us.
Yep, I appreciate it. And that's really Fairway's claim to fame, is they have a mission statement that has a lot of different values. Have fun, be humble, speed to respond. And in any business, and you guys know this very well, people will say, like, what are you known for? Like, how did you build your business? And a lot of it is because being responsive. In this business, that's key. If you call and I don't answer the phone, or I don't text you and say I'm tied up, I'll call you right back, this partnership doesn't work.
Sure.
We build relationships. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing, my whole career. So we're part of a team. We have the same objective, to get the folks to closing, get them to closing on time. And we're customer focused, Fairway down, from top down. It's all about the customer, and that's customer service is key to anything. And a relationship, which I know is part of the mission for you guys in this venture, is to build more than just a transactional situation. We're building relationships with our customers, and they become friends, and we're generationally lending. I mean, I'm on my third generation, sometimes almost fourth after 44 years. So I appreciate it. Again, it's great to be a part with you guys.
And the responsiveness, it was, you were sharing a story with us when we first came in the room about an agent that called you. I mean, what was that story?
It was probably 40 years ago, sometime around 1990, when a certain realtor in Manassas just got in the business. I was in the doctor's office having an appointment, and they called me and they said, Mr. Heltzel, you have a call. And I have a call. What are you talking about? So I pick up the phone. Of course, it's on the wall. Pick up the phone, push the button, and it's Forrest. He says, hey, man, I know you're at the doctor, but I got a question. I called your office, and your assistant Kim said it was okay to call. I said, okay, it's fine. What's the question? He answered the question.
But in his defense, this was before cell phones, probably. Right?
It was before cell phones. And I mean,
and he needed you.
I got called out of a gala one time for the hospital foundation. They called me, paged me. I had to go to a hallway, and an agent called me. So they tracked me down, but that's all right.
Whatever
if I can't
it
talk to you
takes.
now, I'll call you in a minute.
So clearly, when Kim was talking to me, she was saying he's at the doctor. You don't need to call it. I mean, but I was able, because I was a criminal investigator, so I was able to get enough information.
And I mean, maybe you thought I wasn't going to make it. I mean, there was some
He was checking on you.
emergency question,
I mean, if we're going to put customer first.
Hey,
Absolutely.
customer before doctor appointment.
That's great. Well, Rob, I know it's been a challenging couple years in the mortgage industry, right? With the interest rates, everything going on, and the market's kind of, it's a little flat, I would say, right? Yeah. So tell us, like, what have you been doing, and you guys as a company, to differentiate yourselves during these times?
Okay, I mean, I think some of the challenges are obvious, right? There's been a limited inventory. We know that inventory is slowly coming back. We know that interest rates rose over the last 2 years, and you guys know this very well. In all the years I've been doing this, I don't recall a market where rates and prices went in the same direction. So the rates went up and the prices went up. That seems
very unique,
counterintuitive, right? It should go the other way. But, if you go back and look from 1971 through today, well over 30 years, the average mortgage rate is 7.74. And today we're probably looking somewhere around 6 or 6.25 on the average. So rates are about where they have been for the last 30 or 40 years. Now they're up some from where they were 4 years ago, but those were legendary low rates. So we've got the rates, although the rates are now starting to tail down, which is what we've been waiting for. I think the biggest thing is the hype, right? You can't watch the news, look at the paper, look online, and not see somebody tell you, oh, this is not a good time to buy, or rates are horrible. And what we talk about at Fairway and within my team is don't buy the hype, right? Yeah. There's no such thing as the perfect time to do anything. Like if you're buying stock and you wait for the very low point, you'll never hit the very low point. So you got to get in the game at some point, and perception, is a big part of this too. Like people think, well, I have to save up a bunch of money to do this, or I need perfect credit. Well, those aren't those aren't necessarily truths, because there are a lot of loans with very low money down, especially for first-time buyers. You don't need perfect credit. If you need help with your credit, we'll help you rebuild it. So I think our solutions, are sit down and talk to us. And that's my point to prospective buyers all the time, and has been, is you need to sit down and get educated. Because I think at my core level, I'm an educator. I want to explain things so that you understand it. I think that's an important part of my long-term time in this business, is being able to explain things so people understand them. But I think the solution is you get with your realtor, your professional, you talk to your lender, you talk to them early, and you start finding out what options are available, what the process is like, what do you need to do, how do you work if you don't have perfect credit. The issues with the buyer agency, which you guys have spent a lot of time on and have shared some great information, is there's a perception out there that that's a deal killer, both from the realtor side and the lender side.
But it doesn't have to be.
Oh, it doesn't have to be, because we've, the industries, realtors and the lenders, the industries change. They adapt right over time, because this isn't the first time we've seen a change. It's sometimes people think it's seismic, right? Like, this is it. This is the one. This is going to do us in. It's not going to do us in, because there's a couple things to keep in mind with that, buyer agency fees, is that the first thing that had to happen was the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, the VA, FHA, they had to agree that cost to your consumer, if they end up bearing it themselves, was not going to be part of the third-party contributions, they call it, or the seller contribution limits. So it's not.
Which are capped for those.
That's right. They're capped.
They may not know that.
Yeah. So they run anywhere between 2% on an investor, 3% to 9% on a primary. So they took that out of it. The other thing is they've allowed now that the buyer broker agreement that you all will have a buyer sign is a part of the contract, and they've made stipulations that certain things have to be in there. The fees have to be normal and customary. They have to be delineated in the agreement specifically, and they have to show up on the closing disclosure. So we've adapted it. They've even allowed, VA allows you to use an unsecured loan. They allow you to use a credit card. So but there are caveats. We have to be able to qualify you with the debt in certain cases. FHA is not allowing unsecured. So, but that's an evolving process too, as you guys know, because you've explained it that way. What we're doing today is probably going to be slightly different in 90 days as the issue gets, more and more active, and the agencies see how this plays out. So,
Yeah, this wasn't a change that came about as it evolves in the market and it's going in a certain direction. This came as a result of litigation. And with that, there had to be changes more immediately to comply. There's a certain period of time to comply. And when Rob talks about concessions that can be made on an investor loan compared to an owner-occupied loan, the 2% and the 3%, it's 2% of the loan amount, 3% of the loan
That's
amount.
correct.
That a seller can contribute. So let's say VA buyer goes VA no money down, which is a program.
Correct.
And his closing costs, his or her closing costs, going to be 3%. And the VA buyer can ask the seller, will you contribute that 3% towards my closing costs? Because I just don't have the financial wherewithal to make this happen. And that can happen. But that used to be the cap. The buyer never had to pay their realtor, and with VA, they weren't allowed to. So VA has now allowed that to happen and considers it a different category. So now they can pay on behalf of the buyer. So the seller can contribute to the buyer agency contribution that the purchaser would have to their agent on behalf of the buyer, and it doesn't interfere with the closing costs that they otherwise would have received.
That's right. And I mean, the agency, the buyer agency, I mean, it's all part of negotiation, right? And you guys have covered this. From my perspective, I don't know that it's that much different than it's ever been, because if you had a first-time buyer with limited cash, which is the The model first-time buyer is very little cash to put down. So sometimes people will say, well, I've got all this money to put down. Well, if you do, a first-time buyer loan is really not where you need to be because it offers no advantage.
Yeah.
But if you came in with no money, then we would look for grant money to get your down payment covered. Then we would suggest that possibly you raise the price of the house to allow the seller to net the same thing and pay your closing costs. There, it's the same to them. Bumping the price up $10,000 might cost you $50 a month. $50 a month versus scratching up $10,000 and calling everybody you know and asking them to pay you back and asking mom and dad to give you money is a whole lot easier. So these same strategies still exist. We're just talking about them in a different light. But taking that concession, taking that buyer agency out of the concession is a huge part of it, especially with VA, because in the beginning when this issue hit the table, everybody was concerned about the VA and the first-time buyers because traditionally they don't have or are not required to have a lot of skin in the game. And we've talked and we've agreed that my team in Fairway, will contribute money, a lender credit of $9.95 on any transaction we handle for you guys, and that will, help your borrower with some of that cash that they need, and we're glad to do that. So
To go towards the buyer agency fee.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So we incorporated with the agency group. Lonnie and I spoke about this, and we said, it's so essential that a buyer has a realtor. And when you're talking about any buyer, really, the real estate market changes so frequently, and people buy homes. Well, they sell homes about every 12 years. So a lot of times they're either first-time home buyers or they're repeat buyers, but there's such a period of time in between. And so it's essential to have that professional in the deal, and somebody going about it on their own without a professional, and then there being one on the other side representing the seller, you're just at a huge disadvantage. There's just so much to a real estate transaction. I mean, we could talk about all the details, the complexities of it. But the reality is you need one. So we know you need one, and we talked to Robin and we talked to Barry in South Carolina, and they're our preferred lenders. And we said, what can we do to work this out? So if a buyer comes and meets with us and we sign the buyer agency agreement before we start looking at properties, which is what is necessary and should always have been necessary, and there is a fee agreed to, and the seller says, under no circumstances am I going to pay the fee, then the buyer's responsibility financially to us would be reduced to $9.95 with our forgiveness clause. And the reason being is because we as realtors do not want to stand between the American dream of homeownership and a buyer. It's just not putting the allegiance to them. It's the fiduciary duty is to that buyer, and we are below that. When it flips, there's a problem. And so we are behind them. And Rob and Barry said this and said, well, if the $9.95 is the minimum, we'll cover that if they use us as the lender. So in that scenario, worst case scenario, the seller does not contribute, drops to $9.95. They use Barry or Rob for the loan. The lender covers the $9.95 as a credit at closing to the buyer because it's the buyer's responsibility. They're just handling it for them. The buyer has representation at no cost to them.
Yes. So Forrest, a lot of people, especially in our industry, they're probably looking at us and saying, how can you do that? Where's the value? We understand that there is a value to a buyer having representation, and we want to make sure that there's no buyer left behind. Now, if you're a first-time buyer, if we try to negotiate your commission with the seller, we are working to get you in that property. And if it just isn't working out, we're not going to be leaving you without any representation and without helping you, which I think is very unique, right, in our business. And I think this is a great opportunity for our industry to make it about the consumer again, right, and make sure that we're helping people, be able to achieve the American dream. And you're always giving the statistics about the net worth of a renter versus the net worth of a homeowner. And if we could make more renters homeowners, what could that do for our communities and for our country?
So when we have a relationship, when I used to have repeat buyers, they would always say, "Now's when I call Rob," right?
Yeah.
Because they knew the process. We'd get together, agreement signed. Now I call Rob. And the life cycle of home ownership may start out with a little townhouse or a condo when you get out of college or you leave your parents' home. But it's a life cycle. That is the first, and then it starts to progress. And there may be many homes. So when we invest in the first-time buyer, and we say that if the deal doesn't work out because of our commission, then you won't be a first-time buyer. So now they're back into renting. Well, if the deal doesn't work out, there's not even $9.95 for the realtor.
No, it's a lose-lose situation.
It's a lose-lose.
Yeah.
How often has a realtor worked with someone? We explained this in one of our other podcasts, that realtors are only successful if the deal works out and it goes to closing. Ready, will, and able buyer that performs at closing. If the buyer's not able to perform because of our fee, then they are either a renter or they're still living with their parents or roommates or whatever they're doing, but they're not starting the path to the American dream of home ownership. So what are we investing in? We're investing in them because we believe in them. We believe so strongly in home ownership for every reason, schools, community, every reason, that's where we step it up. Now, we're going to stay in touch with them through the entire life cycle that they go through as they progress in life. And they also may want to invest in real estate. So this is a one-time investment of our time into you so you can experience that. And the median income or the median net worth of a homeowner, $396,400.
And a
a
renter?
non-homeowner, $10,400.
Yeah, huge.
And I know when we go down payment, closing costs, and realtor fee, it's going to exceed that. So if we already know the numbers and we already know the folks can't afford it,
Yeah.
what are we going to do solution-based
Absolutely.
to help this? This is an opportunity for the real estate industry to be so favorably viewed by the public.
And let me say, most sellers out there that I've come into contact with, they're on board with having a buyer's agent. And the reason they're on board with having a buyer's agent on the other side and helping to pay for that buyer's agent is because it's a smoother transaction. It's a smoother process, right? And the idea is that the deal is put together and that the seller walks away with as much money as they can in the shortest period of time with the least amount of hassle. And the way they're going to do that is by having a professional buyer's agent. And we're just saying that in those situations where we may not be able to actually guarantee that that buyer is going to be able to pay for that representation, we're going to step in and we're going to help them out and we're going to take care of it. And thanks to Rob and Barry in South Carolina, we're going to walk in and we're going to try to make sure that no first-time buyers ever left behind in the process.
Right. And from the perspective of the home buyer, for those of you who have never bought before, this is the first time where it is necessary for you to be responsible for paying your agent. That's why this is coming up. The way it used to be is the seller, almost 100% of the time in all residential deals, contributed whatever the amount was going to be that the buyer agent was going to get. That was the amount contributed by the seller. So it was always paid by somebody else. And now with this class action suit, it's being paid by the buyer. So we are solution-based by the buyer. And when this group of people talks, and we talk with Rob, we know through his experience, 40 years plus in the industry, it is essential that it's all the difference in the world not doing it on your own as a buyer and actually working with a realtor. So the solution is let's work something out so every buyer has that option.
Has the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's pivot back to Rob a little bit. Forrest and I tend to talk a lot.
Overpower things.
You know, him more than me, by the way.
This is our first special guest, and we
I'm
just
shocked.
Rob,
That's a
talk for a
shocking-
few minutes.
You never
and then-
called me in the doctor's office.
Oh, that's funny. But yeah, let's talk about like where do you see the market going between now and like the first quarter next year? Do you ever have that crystal ball?
Yeah,
Rob?
it's polished up. I left it in the car. We've been waiting for a decline in rates. I think, depending on who you talk to, and we participate in a lot of podcasts and a lot of, experts in the market, and it's taken longer than expected. But I think there's a general agreement that we should see a slightly lower rates before the end of the year, and then potentially lower further in 2025. Now, is that going to be 4% or 5%? I have no idea. I think it will be lower. I mean, I would like to think we might break 6%. But again, if you go back and look at those statistical numbers, if we could do 5.99 or 6 for 10 years, the market adjusts, everybody adjusts. We come up with products and ways to deal with it. When these rates shot up close to 8, we started doing temporary buy downs again, which is something we did back in the 80s when rates were 13. When I started in the mortgage business, the VA rate was 18%. And so we had to come up with ways to manage that. Now you'll say that, the house was $88,000 and that's a fact, but the wages and everything is not kept up with the rise in rates or prices. So we start doing temporary buy downs again, which lowers the rate for the first year, and then it bumps up 1%, and maybe it bumps up a second time. But you get in the game, you get in early at a more affordable payment. Because one of the things that we used to talk about is how long will you keep this house? And I think the average, you guys would know better than me, but somewhere around 7 years, that an average, first time especially. The question now is not how long are you going to keep the house, it's how long are you going to keep this mortgage? Because life happens, right? Rates might come down, you want to refinance. You start having a family, you need more space. So now the house is too small. So, do you move? Do you do renovation loans? We have a lot of solutions for things like that. But, I think the rates will come down some. I think the industry will continue to adapt and products will come out that will help with affordability, because that's what this is all about. But I think at the end of the day, it's still blocking and tackling. Nothing's changed. We still have to do a good job.
Still relationships.
It's still relationships. The relationships are important. One of the things that we talk about is getting out and staying connected with your partners. I do think the market will improve. I think the inventory is starting to creep up. You guys would certainly validate that. And the more first-time buyers we can get in the market, which we believe are going to drive the market for the next couple of years, and that's what I did when I first started in the business, was target lending for Virginia housing. As those folks get into the market, it frees up the inventory, and the inventory starts to move. So, if we can get the first-time buyers in and help them get in, then I think it's a good thing. And so I think this market is on the up.
Great.
And we'll see.
That sounds like good news. And
I think
Rob,
so.
I want to thank you for being our special guest and our first guest.
Hey, man, appreciate it.
RE in real time. And just want to remind everyone out there, reach out to Rob. He's a resource for you. He's part of our team here in Virginia, and he's willing to help. Also, reach out to Forrest or myself or one of our agents about, the first-time buyer program that we have. And if you want more information about that, don't hesitate to let us know, because we really want to help. We want to stand by the first-time buyers. We want to make sure that we are taking part in the community and helping to continue to build home ownership and the value of home ownership in the communities in which we serve. So I think that's it for episode number 4. And don't forget to subscribe, okay? Because if you subscribe, you actually get a little reminder every time we put a new podcast on the system. So thank you for your support. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rob.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Rob.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you.